I'm not going to spend a lot of time going over what's in the ribbon here, how to type into cells, which FYI is just clicking on a cell and typing into it, and you can press enter to leave it there. And of course how to just do a regular function is you click equal, and then you can write your function there. So 4 plus, oh, oops, I have it on directional, not number lock, equals 4 plus 5, and that will produce 9. That is a simple formula. And that is how you do all of the arithmetic. You could do equals 4 times 5 with a little asterisk, and that's 20. Those are some very basic things, and I'm not going to spend too much time going over that. That's just something you're going to have to get used to. Specifically, the ribbon here. You will eventually learn where everything is in here through practice, and that's why I'm saying projects are so important, because practice is the only way to remember these. Me going over, oh, this is where the line is, this is where the maps are. I didn't even know the maps were here. You'll eventually learn where the really important things are. The home being many of them. Okay. The first thing we're going to start off with is the if function. This is where you start really programming in Excel. I mean, it's not actually Excel programming, it's Excel VBA, which I also have a course on that, go check it out. But as far as operating the worksheets, creating formulas, if is where it all starts. So you really want to learn if. It's going to be your best friend. With if, you can type equals if, and then if you hit tab, it'll auto-select this first one here, and it'll put that parenthesis, and then you'll hop right into the if function. And the first thing here is a logical test. The logical test is either a comparison that can be either true or false, and I wrote here probably using operators such as greater than, equal, or this less than, greater than together means not equal, or it could be a number where a 0 results in a false and any other real number results in a true. That's a more advanced step. I think we should probably start with just the equals. A classic case of this is checking if a cell is equal to 22. So I click here and you can see it's highlighted. It's given its own little blue text. That's how you know that it's a formula. You're not just putting in, if it were just a number, it's still the black text. If you actually click on a cell and it's a cell reference, it'll give it its own color. So you can say if this is equal to 22, and that is a logical test. If this is less than 20, which it's not, so that would be false. If it's greater than 20, true. If it's greater than or equal to 20, still true. That's for the most part how this works with the logical test. And then the next thing you need is the value if true. Now this is, you put a comma to separate these different parameters. So you see here it's currently highlighting, or it's boldening logical test. If you put a comma, it'll go to value if true. So with the comma, you're now typing what if this were equal to true, which right now B16, that is this right here. It's greater than or equal to 20. Yes, it's 22, so this is true. If this function is true, what do we want this to produce? And if it's true, we'll say over 20. And if you put it in quotes, which I just did, then that means it's a text. If you didn't put it in quotes, then it would assume it's a number, and if you didn't, and if it cannot be converted to a number, such as just writing over 20 is not a number, then it will give you an error. See, so if I do that, it'll say there's a problem with this formula because it thought this was a number, and over 20 cannot be converted to a number, so we have to put it in text, or in quotes, I mean. Over 20. And this is resulting in true, so it is automatically going right here. If it were false, we can say under 20. And so if we went somewhere else, here, we'll say 15 right here. You'll say instead of this, we're right here, so instead it's looking at H11, which is equal to 15. If 15 is greater than 20, we'll see, nope, it is under 20. Now if we didn't put these in here, as I wrote here, the default is true, and for the value of false, the default is false. If I get rid of those, well, I guess you do at least have to put in a comma, it just results in a false. Whereas if I change this to 25, right here, then it is not participating right now. Well, that is very interesting. I guess false has a default, but true, it's not wanting to default for us. Alright, well maybe I need to change that because maybe it doesn't even have a default. I don't know. Either way, you almost never want to leave these blank. It's almost always better that you put at least something here for the value of true. A common thing that I do is if it's true, then 1. If it's false, then 0. And that way it just flags it as true, being a 1. And that's really nice because a 1 can be used in arithmetic. If you want to count how many flags are the result of this if statement, say there's a bunch of them, you can just count the number of 1s. That's a really easy thing to do. So, of course, I've got a little example here for us. This is the senior discount and the student discount. And here we've got the name, the age, and the school. And here we want to see if they qualify for a senior discount or a student discount. I'm going to go ahead and delete these. In this workbook, if you have it open, I've left them in there so you can see the formulas as it is, but if you want to try them for yourselves, you can just delete them. For the senior, I'm going to say that you're a senior if you're 65 years of age or older. So we will write an equals if, and then we will go over to this age, and then we will say if this is greater than or equal to 65, then you are indeed a senior. And I'm going to say, yes, you get the discount. And false, if you're under 65, we're going to say, no, you do not get that discount. Or what did I do wrong? No, I put an X. I accidentally put a little equal in there, or a minus sign. That should not have been in there. Greater than or equal to 65. And Annika here is not over 65, so she does not get the senior discount. Pull that down. What I did was Control D, which fills in the rest based on the top. But you can also copy it and paste it. And as you see, it changes the reference in here. B16, it's now looking at this one. B17. B18, it just comes down. If you copy a formula down, it works really excellent like that. And we're going to go over cell references right here, exactly how that works. But for now, if you reference a cell and you copy it down, it'll move the reference cell down with it. Now we can do the same thing for the student discount. And you see if we copy this over, it was referencing the cell here. So if we move this formula one cell to the right, the reference cell will move one cell to the right, which works out really well for this because we want to reference the school now because we were looking at the student discount. And we know if they get a student discount is if there is anything here. So we'll say if this is equal to blank, then no. They're not in school, so they do not get a student discount. If it is not blank, then yes. And as you saw, we denoted blank with quotation, quotation. There are many ways to do this. You could say if length is equal to 0, that means that it looks at how many characters are in this cell, and if there's no characters, then it says 0 because it doesn't have anything in it. That will also work. Right now, we'll just go with the equals blank. That works out just fine. If this is blank, then no, otherwise yes. And as usual, if we wanted to copy it down to these other ones, to see is Sophia, does she get a student discount? We can just copy it down and I'll press Control D to fill it down. As you see, this is now referencing her school. And I will copy it down here, Control D to fill down. Yes, Elise, who goes to Oxford, gets a student discount, and Aiden does not go to school, so he does not get a student discount. But Aiden is over 65, so he does get a senior discount. That's just a simple way at how an if statement could work. I hope that wasn't too bad. We're going to go over practice problems soon where you can actually look at how to do an if function and practice it for yourself. But before we get to that practice problem, we're going to look at cell references. Earlier in this if statement up here, we saw exactly how a cell reference worked, in that if you change nothing about it and you can copy the function wherever, it will reference the cell relatively. That means if you take this and you copy this, I press Control C, that's why it has this dotted border around here. And if I copied it right here, this function is referencing a cell 2 to the left. So it is going to, if I copy it here, this function is going to reference this cell right here because this is 2 to the left of this cell. As you see, if I press F2 and I can look into this, you can also do this by double clicking. If I press F2, you can see F16 here. This is referencing a cell to the left. I'm going to go ahead and delete that, press the delete key. Now with the cell reference, there's many other ways. You can do it to where if you copy this, it doesn't change. It doesn't change no matter where you put it. We can do that with the dollar signs. I should probably just go ahead and read this, shouldn't I? Okay. When another cell is referenced in a function, it is by default a relative reference, as you saw up here. This means that if a cell containing the formula moves, so does the reference cell in the formula. This can be advantageous at times. As you saw up here, it was advantageous that when we pulled it down, it traveled with us. It can be advantageous at times, but it is possible to lock the reference cell. I probably could use a better tone for that. It can be advantageous at times, but it is good to know that if you want to lock the reference cell, it is possible. You can press F4 after clicking the reference cell, and it will cycle through the 4 different cell references. Now, so if I were to go and look at this, I'm going to look at my formula I wrote up here, click F2 to look into it. If you click on a cell, then it might work out better to just write a whole new formula. And then I'll click on a cell. And as you see, I just clicked on it. So this is right here, and this cursor right here is right on the end of this cell reference. If you click F4, immediately it will cycle through. F4 puts 2 dollar signs right there. A dollar in front of B, which is the column, and a dollar in front of 19, which is the row. Keep clicking F4 and it will cycle through the different cell references as I listed here. No dollar signs, 2 dollar signs, one in front of the row and one in front of the column. The difference between all of these is that D44, or like it is here, B19, is totally relative, which means that it is going to travel with you everywhere you copy it. If you press F4 once, it's got 2 dollar signs, which means it's locking the B and it's locking the 19. So that means if we were to say equals 5, then 1, otherwise 0. This is referencing it here, and if I copy it here, it's still referencing it. If I copy it down over here, it's still referencing it. It does not change. That is what is called an absolute reference, which means it will always be referencing the cell that you had it when you first wrote it. And then if we go here, we can highlight this, or I think it also works if you don't highlight and you just have your cursor on it. Yes, it does. So if you put your cursor on it or highlight it, either works. Then if you press F4, then it will cycle again to the next one, which is mixed for absolute row and relative column. Now this means that it will always be stuck on row 19, this cell reference here, but it can be moved on the column. So if we can look at that in action, if we go ahead and we copy it here, we will see that the column has moved because the column is not locked. But if we copy it downward, it stays right there because row 19 is locked. And this is still just as many spaces away from this column. This is something that may be a little bit confusing right now, but you will get used to it, and this is very important because it will greatly speed up the rate at which you can write formulas. And oftentimes if you're doing it for large data tables, I know with these 4 rows here, it may not seem like much to go in and edit every one of these. But if you had 100 of these rows, trust me, it is much better to know how these dollar signs work than to go in and edit the numbers and the letters for 100 different functions. So yes, this right here is referencing 19 and B, but the B is not locked. So whatever this is, let's say 7 cells away, this will also carry 7 cells away. So it will be in C now. This is still going to be here, and 19 is locked. 19 is locked, but this is not. So it comes over to C19 just like this one. It doesn't look very useful now, but it is, I promise. And of course, for the last one, we can press F4 and it will go and it will do the other one. And so it's locking this column and it's not locking the row. And this is what I consider certainly the more useful of the two. If I copy it, you see here I press Ctrl C. I'm going to go and paste it in all 4 of these. Now it will always be referencing this B column. But now it is going to move down as this cell reference moves down. So this is referencing 70, this is referencing 70, and now if there were one here, then this would be referencing, here, I'll just go and make this 5. So you see these are now 1, because, oh, that's nice, I brought this down with it. Go and delete you, don't really want you, okay. but it's referencing B here, and this is still referencing B here, but it's on row 20. Alright, I know that might have been a little bit confusing. Hopefully a practice problem here will go ahead and clear little things up, so hopefully you can get a good idea of it before you go and try it for yourself. In this example, we want to project the value of houses at different interest rates. And how many years we're projecting is 10, and this is something that we can reference, and we can change this. We can change it to 15, we can change it to 10, and you see all of these change. And we want to do it for how much is a house worth today, and what is the interest rate that we're doing it at. And I already wrote a function in here, but that's just for you to look at so that you can see it on your screen. But if I go ahead and delete that, we can go ahead and write it for ourselves. So what we're looking at is we want to know this house price. We want to multiply that, asterisk. We want to multiply the house price by 1 plus this, because that's how interest rates work. 1 plus 4% is 1.04, and if you multiply something by 1.04, it is essentially accumulating it at 4% interest. So if I do a parenthesis 1 plus, and I look up here for 4%, I'm just going to go ahead and say yes. You see that it accumulated it for 1 year at 4%, it gains $4,000. Because 4% of 100,000 is 4,000, so that makes sense. And if you press F9 when looking in a function, it will complete the function for you. And so if we press F9 altogether, we'll just do the whole thing, but I'm going to go and do it step by step. F9 on B40 will give us a 0.04. F9 on A41, that is 100,000. And we can F9 here. This will be 1.04, so we're doing 100,000 times 1.04 is 104,000. The F9 is really quite useful, especially if you write longer formulas. You can really dig into what's going on in there, and it can help you dissect some of these longer formulas you'll end up writing eventually. But we don't want to accumulate it for 1 year, because this is only 1 year of accumulation. We want to accumulate it for 10 years. And how we do that is with an exponent. We say to the power of this, which is 10. And we can F9 through it. This would be worth 10, and of course this would be 1.04. And so that comes out to 148,000. And I'm going to go ahead and quickly F9. So 1.09 to the 10th power should be about 1.48. Yes, it is. It's this big long thing, and then it multiplies that by A41. Is how this works out. If you know PEMDAS, that is how this order of operations works out. But when in doubt, use parentheses. Now, if we were to go ahead and we were to copy this over here, all of these references would get mixed up. You see, because these are all relative, it's looking at this relative, it's looking at this relatively, and it's looking at this relatively. So it's going to move all of them over here. We like the 1.25. We're glad that it's stuck there. We do not much care for this right here. We don't want to know what 148,000 is to 1.25% interest accumulated. We want to know what 100,000 is. So we need to lock this in place. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go over to A41 and I'm going to lock it. But I'm only going to lock right here this column. I want to lock column A so that when I carry it over here, it's still referencing column A. So I'm going to F4, that's absolute. F4 again, that's mixed, but it's mixed for the row. We want the $sign in front of here. So I'm going to F4 there. That's perfect. That's exactly what we want. So if we copy it over, it's now referencing the 100,000, and it's referencing the 1.25. But this is way off in Never Never Land over here. And now what we want for this one is we want it to be absolute. Regardless of where this function is here, 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 we want it to be looking at this 10. So this needs to be absolute. So I'm going to go ahead and click F9 right there. Oops, not F9. F4. I'm going to click F4 right there. That's going to lock that in place. And for this one, well, I'll go ahead and do that. And so as you can see, this one, it's finally going to work. And that makes sense. If at a house price, if it accumulates at a much higher interest rate, 4%, it's going to be worth more than if it accumulates at a lower interest rate. If you're not getting as good of a return, it's not going to be worth as much in 10 years. That makes sense intuitively. But as you see, if we copy these down, once again, it's going to give us mumbo jumbo. And that's because it is now referencing here as the interest rate. 4% is a reasonable interest rate. $148,000 worth of interest. It doesn't look at dollars. As a percentage, that is an unreasonably high percentage at least in most markets. So what we need to do is we need to lock this here so it stays on the 4%. So once again, we could F4, 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 F4. But what also works is you can go and you can just type the $ in if you don't really want F4 through it. I do like the F4, but if you don't, then you can just type it there so it stays in the 4%. And as you see, I filled that down with the Control D. And as you see, it's still right here. It's looking at the house price for this row. It's looking at the interest rate for this column, and it's looking at this absolutely. That's perfect. That's exactly how we want it. And as you see, if we copy this, we can paste it in all of these cells, and it will look at all of them exactly how we want. To where this is looking at this, this, and this. This one's looking right here, here, and here. Perfect. And as you see, I wrote here, if you write your formula correctly, you should be able to copy the formula to all 10 cells, and it will work perfectly, exactly as ours did. Alright, I hope that wasn't too confusing, because you're going to have an opportunity to try it for yourself. And I really suggest you go and take the time to pause it and try this for yourself, because this is where you're really going to hone those skills of yours. And take this opportunity to do that. I'm going to go ahead and read through this problem with you. Use if functions and cell references to flag each charge in a charge group. Your bank lists your charges with the suggested groups in parentheses. So it says here, you went to the Sizzler, and it is in the food category. You had a mortgage payment, and it is in the rent category. Your bank is smart, and so it automatically goes and it knows what these are. If the charge description contains the keyword for each charge group, flag it with a 1. Otherwise, give it a 0. I wrote a couple notes here to help you with this. And that's to help you find the description contains a keyword, you can use the find function. And the find function is really nice because you can enter a keyword text, which in this case, if we wanted to find food, like this, we would put food in the keyword text, in the text you're searching for, which would be right here, this charge description. And you can use that function and it will be able to find. So if I say equals find, and if I wanted to find food, or I could also just simply type food. If I want to find it in this charge description, it will give us the location of it, 10. And that means it is 10 characters in. So Sizzler plus a space plus a parentheses is 9 or 10 characters in. That's what it's telling us. And we can use that to help us determine if, of course, food is in this, or if this is rent, like this one is. Note 2, if the find function does not find a keyword, it will result in a octothorpe, #, hashtag, whatever you want to call that, value error. To help with this, use is_error parentheses. If the value inside is an error, it will return true, otherwise false. That makes sense. So if I say equals find here, and if it's looking for food inside of this, this is not food, so it will give you this value error. That means it cannot find food in this description right here. And so we can go and we can type is_error like that, and it results in true, meaning this is truly an error. If we were to copy this up here, except we move this down here, this is false. False as in this is not an error. Alright, I hope that helps you, because this is something you'd be able to use in an if statement to be able to actually find if this were truly food or if this is fake food. You can do that for all of these different charge groups. Best of luck. Okay. So how we're going to do this is I'm going to say, it's probably best if I just started with find. If I can find food within Sizzler, then we know that this here is food. And it is. And I'm going to go ahead and give these excellent references. Excellent, that's not the right word. I'm going to give them appropriate references. So this one I want to lock the row here, but I don't want to lock the column, so that when I copy it over, it goes with the column, but it stays here on the row. So I'm going to lock the column. And for this one I want to lock, or I'm going to lock the row here, but I'm going to lock the column for this one because I want it to drag down for each of the rows, but I don't want it to change. I want to keep looking at the description for each one of these columns. So right here, 1, 2, 3. Now it's locked on the column, but not on the row. As you see, if we copy this, we're going to get values for everything except for the food, which makes sense. It's not rent, it's not leisure, it's not travel, so it'll return errors. And the same, if I copy it to all of these, I'm going to do it. This is a paste special. If I just Control V, that is a paste. If I Control Alt V, that's a paste special. And that way, if I do this, it's not going to mess up the formatting of these nice borders like I did here because I'm a fool. If I go ahead and I paste special just the formulas, it's not going to ruin all the borders around here. Okay, now as you see, there's a lot of value errors. And that's because for all of these, there is only one charge group. So this one is rent, but it's not food or leisure. And look how ugly that looks. We don't want to leave it like that. Plus, that doesn't really give us the results we want. It works out much better if we use an is error. So if I go ahead and I copy this to all of these, it's starting to look a little cleaner. So what I'm going to do is, if this is equal to false, if what we just wrote is equal to false, and 1, 0. Because if it's false, then it is not an error. And if it's not an error, that means we could find this charge group. So as you see here, it says this is food. If we copy it over here, this is true, which is not false. So we can go ahead and copy this over here. Copy formulas. And it is copying, and this now results in a 0. And we could F9 through this. So we are looking for rent, F9, and we are looking in this charge description. If it can find rent and Sizzler food, that's what the find function does. If we F9, it says value. And is this an error? Yes, it is. It is truly an error. F9. Does true equal false? No, it does not. So that should result in false. And so if it's false, it goes to the value if false result, which is 0. So that's why this whole thing will F9 result in 0. I pressed escape to get out of that because I don't want to keep the 0 there. And that's exactly how this function works. And so if I go ahead and I'm going to copy, and then I'm going to Control V, Control Alt V, paste special, and I'm going to paste only the formulas. Now we have a flag, a 1 for each one of these. So it says for the leisure, we don't have any for a while until right here. We took surfing lessons, which the bank said this is a leisure. All right. Looks like it's working to me. Is that what we got here? No, they just we just switched it. Yeah, that's also a good way to do it because that'll just give us false, and then false will go right over here. We don't need to set equal to anything because it's looking for a true or false, and it gives us a false. That's also a good way to do it. Both work, both work. Okay, I hope you were able to get that. If not, don't worry, you're going to get plenty of practice and you're going to get really good at this eventually. I'm sure of it. Stick with it. I will see you in the Excel training for the VLOOKUP section.